Hey guys, so yesterday we had a conversation on this show about how nuts it is that we are even having conversations in the halls of the legislature in Minnesota about Trump derangement syndrome. Our politicians are discussing whether or not it's defensible for people to commit crimes and then go, well, I had Trump derangement syndrome. I didn't know what I was doing. Well, there's more. There's more. You're not going to believe it. So today we have our good friend Ben Krause, who is a VA accredited attorney, to talk to us about yet another piece of legislation coming forward in Minnesota that is, in my opinion, insane. But he's going to be able to tell us a lot more about it. I'm not a lawyer. Jason, you're not a lawyer, even though we'd probably be really good lawyers. But Ben is a good lawyer. So he's going to tell us. Ben, please explain to us what's going on. I know that this entails benefits, access to benefits, and that type of thing. So if you can, just kind of give us the rundown.
All right. So here's the skinny. So in Minnesota, they are trying to help vets, and that's what the bill says, that is amending an old statute that came out in 2017. So the whole idea is, or at least as it's sold, if you think about it in terms of like sales pitches to sell cars to people buying cars, they're trying to get an amendment through, and they're saying, hey, we got these claim sharks going on. We want to protect vets from claim sharks. In 2017, the story was, well, now we have pension poachers. We want to protect veterans and widows from pension poachers. Today it's claim sharks. And so they want to protect veterans from sharks, basically. And so on the surface, the law, as they're proposing to amend it, seems probably fine. But when you start to dig into the law, and so the statute as well as the bill that they're proposing to amend it restricts a veteran's access to legal representation from VA accredited attorneys in Minnesota. And it has for quite some time, where VA accredited attorneys in Minnesota stopped helping veterans in Minnesota when on appeals for veterans benefits because of the way the law was written. So the law at the time that they're wanting now to amend basically says, it gives you some like Enron style fines. And if you violate the law, then they'll fine you $1,000 a day per occurrence, so these are Enron level fines.
Okay, so hold on a second. Why would a veteran need, devil's advocate, why would a veteran need to hire an attorney versus go through the American Legion or the VA proper? Like everyone says, right? Like if I'm in the community and I don't know any better, and I meet another veteran and they're like, hey, did you go to the VA and get your benefits? No, I don't even know where to go. They're going to say, well, go to the Legion or go to the VFW. In what instance would I need an attorney?
So as the law is written right now, you can hire an attorney for pay all across the country through the Department of Veterans Affairs federally, their code and regulations. And that allows you to hire an attorney for pay after the agency has issued a decision on an initial claim. Mm-hmm. So only after that happens can you then hire an attorney for help, and not before. So basically, Congress has decided that veterans, unlike illegal immigrants or accused criminals, do not have a right to hire legal counsel when they choose. Only after the federal government develops a case and evidence against that person do you then have a right to legal counsel in America, regardless of what state that you're in. And until that point, you only get free help, which is usually those in the VSO community traditionally. So Legion, your county veteran service officers, stuff like that. And that's normally what's been going on for decades up until I would say right around the lockdowns and stuff. And that's when things started to change. And you started to have these basically companies kind of similar to H&R Block helping veterans with initial claims. And those are things that if you're VA accredited, you know not to touch an initial claim.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, so that's the gist of it. So now we have these what they call claim sharks, but basically these are companies that are all over the country that assist veterans, usually through a consulting service, advising the veteran about what to submit or helping the veteran develop evidence like independent medical exams and things like that to submit their package on an initial claim. Veterans can't hire an attorney to do it because we know that that's against the law. And so it's basically left the door open because of the vast number of claims that have been coming through, especially after the PACT Act and when veterans couldn't access VSOs because of the COVID lockdowns when they shut down a lot of the regional offices and county veteran service offices. So a veteran couldn't get to a person in person, literally, to get help. And that's usually the only way you can get help from a VSO is by showing up to their office in person, because usually they won't respond to your phone calls or emails. And so that's not true for everybody, but it's frequently, what veterans complain about. And so they've been going to these unaccredited companies that will pick up the phone, and then they will help sometimes get experts and stuff like that for a veteran's initial claim and improve the odds of getting a better outcome, because they are fully developed, oftentimes fully developed claims. So because they're fully developed, when they get submitted, the claims might get adjudicated more quickly, and the veteran probably has higher odds at getting a good outcome because they developed evidence to support the veteran's initial claim. When you go in with a CVSO or VSO for an initial claim, they usually don't do evidence development. They'll usually fill out the form, and the veteran will have the VSO or whatever go through the medical record, write down what type of claim that they want to file, and then that's usually about it. It's not always true, but that's usually, the gist of what happens. So beyond that, then you have appeals, and that's where attorneys get involved, which is usually the contested claim arena, which we call the decision review request process, or AMA process, Appeals Modernization Act process. So that's where you get into, contested claims and presenting new evidence and stuff like that. That's where an attorney gets involved.
And that is that majority of the work you do is the appeals process.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. That's a lot of information.
I was gonna say, I mean, it's nice to know what that process and that ramp looks like, Ben. My question then is, obviously Minnesota is doing something that's got your hackles up. I think we need to concentrate on what that actually looks like and start directing some advice to people, because it's clear there's already legislation that's in place to protect people from these people, right?
They're supposed to be. I mean, that's what the pension poacher was supposed to address.
So the law already exists in theory for them to protect veterans from these people. Do we know, has the state of Minnesota ever gone after any of these?
So,
good question.
Good question. So as I was informed, the answer is no. So supposedly there's been some incidences. I've requested that evidence from MDVA directly, and also requested an opportunity to speak with Commander's Task Force about it, and they haven't responded with information other than responding to an email. But I haven't received back the evidence in question.
Okay.
There was a hearing on March 3rd about it, and MDVA, Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs, which is pushing this legislation, it's their top priority this session. So it's Senate file 1894 and 1959, and then House file 1855. And so basically, they've been working on it for a while, right? And there are laws in place already that address it. So I practice law, and what I do are legal services, and I'm licensed under the judiciary branch of our government. So we have three branches of government. You have legislative, executive, and judiciary. I fall under the judiciary branch as an officer of the court, and I have a license to practice law in Minnesota, and I provide legal services. And when I'm helping before the Department of Veterans Affairs federally, so the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, I can only do that if I'm VA accredited, and I can only become VA accredited as an attorney if I have a license, and that license is to provide legal services. Make sense?
Okay, question. Why would one want to become a legally accredited VA attorney?
So you cannot represent a veteran before the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs unless you are VA accredited.
Okay.
And you become VA accredited, and it doesn't matter whether you charge a fee or not. If you're representing before the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs a veteran or a widow or something like that, in order to what they call prepare, prosecute, and present information or claim or an appeal or whatever before the agency, you must be VA accredited. So VSOs are VA accredited, but their accreditation is usually held through the organization itself. And then they have the accreditation assigned to the VSOs. If you're an attorney like me, I am independently VA accredited, meaning that because of my own credentials, I was able to and granted the ability to represent veterans through the process.
Why did the government make it possible for lawyers to be VA accredited? I mean, I'm going somewhere with this.
Yeah. So for a long time, it deals with fees. And so for a very long time, you could only charge a veteran a $10 fee for help on the apparently the claims process or the appellate process, basically, at the agency.
Yeah.
And you could only do that if you were VA accredited and after the agency issued multiple denials against the veteran. And that ultimately changed. And hang on a second. That ultimately changed. And in 2007, a veteran could hire after an NOD or notice of disagreement was submitted. Then that changed again. And so the line got pushed back to then allow representation more so before the agency, before it goes to the Board of Appeals for Veterans Claims. And so that basically means that after the agency issues a decision, a veteran can pay for help. You can pay for help by either through a fee, hourly fee, through a fixed fee, or through a contingent fee, or a combination of those fees.
Okay.
And that's how it works. And so basically, veterans were getting screwed, and they weren't getting access to appropriate help. And so the bar kept getting lowered to be able to hire an attorney as more evidence came out that the agency was behaving in an adversarial way. And so for 50 plus years, the argument in front of the VSO community and the VA community was that the agency is not adversarial. If you introduce attorneys, it's going to become adversarial. Therefore, we need to make it financially unreasonable to hire an attorney by keeping the fee at $10, which it had been held at since the 1800s.
So it becomes an issue of there was a need. There was a need for veterans to seek out and hire other help because they weren't getting the help that they were owed and promised. And so now we have this situation where there's gate guarding. It seems the way that you explained it thus far, which was a lot of information, but the way I understood it and the way I have understood it in conversations leading up to today is that there's government agencies here in Minnesota that are gate guarding this process. That they don't want attorneys to be making money on veterans claims because we can do it for free. Well, if you can do it for free, that's fine. But yet there's still long wait times. People are still getting sick and remaining sick. They need the help. And if somebody can help them, then and they want to pay, why would we say no? I guess is my thing. I don't know. Jason, it looked like you had something, but I was on a line there, and I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No, it was, I was trying to understand because I don't think, I know Ben has kind of schooled me on this because a lot of people don't even understand how a veteran enters into the VA system itself. And so I think that was great that we kind of hit it real quickly and fast. But so a CVSO or a VSO can initiate the claim. And then at that point, no different than anywhere else. So those VSOs and the CVSOs are given the ability to kind of negotiate as an attorney in that space, not dissimilar to a realtor who can practice real estate law, right? But then if you ever have an issue with a piece of real estate, you don't go to your realtor to represent you. Now you're going to go get that subject matter expert, that real estate attorney, who is going to go ahead and flip the script and start to get to the actual gnat's ass of the problem. And I think that's where, and correct me if I'm wrong, a VA accredited attorney, somebody who can represent somebody after the point of the initial process, can become a very useful tool. And why would you want to remove that from anybody's arsenal? You know, it's like being forced to keep the public defender when you can afford an attorney. You know, not to say that, I mean, I don't think a lot of these claims you necessarily need to push beyond that point, but there are certain claims I'm sure that you've seen in your career that 100% require an attorney to go rectify or remedy a wrong that's occurred. And so now that all kind of comes back and washes over, why would Minnesota want to remove this quiver from Minnesota's veterans Aero Pack?
And are we the only state going through this?
Well, so it's now going on quite a bit. Minnesota was one of the only states that did it in 2017, and we were definitely one of the first. And the way that the law was written was it violated the U.S. Constitution under the First Amendment and also federal preemption, because the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs has preemption, or they've been given authority to regulate fees and when you can be represented by an attorney across the country. A lot of states now are jumping into that, in part because of this, what they call claim sharks within the VFW arena. And now there's a lot of confusion about who really is a claim shark and what is it. And so you have, like here, for example, the Minnesota Department or Minnesota CVSO community and National CVSO community. So it's called NAC VSO and then MAC VSO locally. A lot of the officials between the two go back and forth. And I've heard, though not seen independent verification, that NAC VSO, the national side, has long wanted to get attorneys back out, and they see it as a turf thing and that no veteran should have to pay to get their benefits. And we all agree. No veteran should have to pay, but if a veteran wants to pay to get representation because they want somebody with advanced legal training to set their eyes on the claim and to address it after it's been denied, I think they should have the right to do that. And so, as I understand it, the National Association of County Veteran Service Officers, as well as the Minnesota Association of County Veteran Service Officers, have both articulated that they don't want attorneys in the mix and are committed to working to push paid help out. And so they're now lumping attorneys in. And again, this is based on U.S. Congress and the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. They have decided that we should be able to do this as long as we do it lawfully and follow their rules. And if you don't, then they won't let you do it anymore. You'll lose your accreditation. But Minnesota knows better, apparently, and they want to better regulate this. And so they've created additional restrictions on accessing, including that if I no longer represent Veterans for Pay in Minnesota, as an example, because in order to do so, I must force my veteran prospective client to sign a disclosure form that was created by the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs with the Minnesota Association of County Veteran Service Officers, so MAC VSO. And they put in there that I have to inform my client that if they want to pay me, my client admits that they can pay a CVSO or VSO to do the same work. And I'm paraphrasing what it says, but when you look at it, it makes a person think that they're basically agreeing to pay the attorney or whoever. The attorney's not referenced expressly, but MDV is trying to apply it to us, that what they're going to pay me to do on an appeal is the same as what they would pay a CVSO to do. Likewise, if I advertise, I have to advertise that a CVSO can do what I do on an appeal. Well, that's
Stupid.
false. And you can't even fit that. If I put a Google ad out in Minnesota, I can't even fit that in. Like, it's too many
Right.
characters. If I tried to do that and I showed people how absurd it was to even try to do it, you can't fit even the disclosure language into a Google ad.
Into
It's
a page.
too long.
Well, what, and I don't understand this. I've never even thought about it until this moment. You know, what kind of training does a CVSO or a VSO have to go through
Oh boy.
to sit in that seat at the county level? I mean, for somebody who's in essence trudging through what would be a pseudo attorney position, in just that one specific regard of putting together claims for the VA on behalf of a veteran. That seems to me that, similar to a realtor, there's got to be hundreds of hours of training that go into it, alongside of regular testing and all these other things to stay on top of the new practices that are going on. I mean, what does that training look like if you're going to take away the ability for a veteran to hire counsel?
Well, to borrow the words of Assistant County Veteran Service Officer Dr. Christy Jonico,
Doctor, come on.
she has explained that you don't need any training. Now, she has a doctorate in design from the University of Minnesota and, focuses on clothing. But for her to become a CVSO, there's no training. You don't need a doctorate. You don't need a Juris Doctor like I have. I went to the University of Minnesota to become a licensed attorney. And so you don't need that. You don't need a bar. You don't need 7 years of training like I had to become a lawyer. You need to be a veteran with basically a DD 214 honorable discharge and be selected to be a CVSO. And then after that, you go through initial training and you have to train in your office for about 120 hours during the first year. And after that, they have regular training of a certain amount of hours, I'm not sure what it is, to maintain their accreditation. And that's the process. So you don't need a degree. You just need to have served with an honorable discharge and a DD 214, talking about your background, and be a veteran, a bona fide veteran. So whatever that's defined as, that Minnesota has its own rule about what that means compared to what the federal government has, or it's a little bit different anyway.
Yeah, there's a different target there.
A different target, yeah. And so, but that's the gist of it. So if you want to be an attorney, the difference there is you had to complete an undergraduate degree. You had to do well enough to get into law school. So that means you had to take what's called the LSAT, which is a 5-hour test. And then you had to get into law school, then complete law school. So it's a 3 years on top of that. And then from there, you have to pass the state bar in whatever state that you're in. And that's usually a multi-day test where not only do you have to pass a multi-day test, but you also usually need to prepare for about 3 months before that, about 12 hours a day to get ready to take it. And so it's a pretty grueling process. And then you apply for your accreditation. At that point, you pass through multiple background checks, both at the state level as well as the federal level. And then you're able to help veterans in that context, as long as you maintain your current continuing legal education. So that's our background as attorneys and what we bring. Additionally, we help people on appeals at different courts. And so you can be admitted to the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, or the United States Supreme Court, and you must be admitted to each of those federal courts. And if you're not, you can't practice there. I don't believe there's any CVSO in Minnesota that's admitted to any of those courts at all. Right, correct.
So then how does that work in an instance where you've got a veteran who's working with maybe a great CVSO or a VSO that can't operate in that space? Like how does that continue forward?
So the the veteran then needs to go find help. Or, as in Minnesota, they have a memorandum of understanding between them and the NVLSP out of Washington, D.C., which is a law firm out there that's nonprofit and are recognized. I believe they're technically a VSO of some type as well. And so they have a referral relationship with this Washington, D.C. law firm. The Washington, D.C. law firm, I believe, can request and receive what are called EJIA fees. So they get EJIA fees if they're successful, which pays them some kind of hourly rate that the veteran doesn't pay. It comes from the Treasury, U.S. Treasury Department. So that's how that works.
So now again, I'm just trying to walk my way through this. So you're being represented by an attorney, even though you're working with the CVSO or the VSO at those particular levels of working through a claim until its final adjudication, right?
Well, so each of the bigger VSOs have a relationship with a for-profit law firm. So the agency equivalent to the VSOs for Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs, for example, they refer their stuff to this nonprofit. But if you're through Disabled American Veterans or Legion, or I believe VFW, you're going to get your appeal referred without your knowledge to one is Chisholm Kilpatrick, and the other is Bergman Moore. So the Legion refers their appeals to the for-profit Bergman Moore, and DAV refers their adverse decisions to Chisholm Kilpatrick out of Rhode Island.
So in Minnesota, you will be represented by an attorney anyway at those appeal points, but just not by one that you chose.
Correct. Well, if you're able to find an attorney that'll represent you in Minnesota despite the law, however that works, then obviously you can hire them if that law firm's not concerned with Minnesota coming after them directly in their state. And so if you're a Minnesota-based attorney, you have an incentive to potentially pull out of the market if you're concerned about telling a veteran or misleading a veteran about your capabilities compared to a CVSO. And also if you're worried about some of the fraud language. So it may be an act of fraud to direct a veteran to a CVSO if you don't believe the CVSO is the best for that case. And so if I'm required to do that by law, which this law would require and does require, then you engage in fraud. And so there's a problem with that, obviously.
By the nature of the verbiage that's being written, it puts an attorney in a potentially precarious position to even practice or take this on.
Right.
And so how many attorneys do we have that are even representing Minnesota veterans outside of the ones that are being referred to by the big organization, which guess what, folks, it costs money. It's not free. Somebody's paying it. And that's clearly not it can't be specified in this new legislation that they would go away.
Right. So what they're doing in the new legislation is they're tightening the language. And so the language, and it's under adjustments right now, but basically what they're trying to tie it in with is a fraud statute that is connected with the financial fraud unit that Governor Tim Walz created by executive order on January 3rd, 2025. And so they're trying to tie it in with that. I think that fraud unit, if I were to guess, that's what it has a lot to do with and what they're really wanting to actually do behind the scenes. But the law as initially proposed was requiring VA accreditation, whether the attorneys representing for pay at the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, at the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, or a Supreme Court. And the problem with doing that is each of those courts have their own unique requirements that are not governed by, they don't care what the Minnesota says, whatever they want, but it's not binding. And it's an improper use of the accreditation system, which is only for representation at VA. There are lots of attorneys that work at the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims that are not VA accredited, even at NVLSP. So that nonprofit that Minnesota has brought on, like they have attorneys there that do work and may get paid for their work at the court, and they're not VA accredited either, which I don't think that they thought about, meaning MDVA. I don't think they realize that. Additionally, the Supreme Court, like if you want to hire somebody to represent you, and those cases cost a lot of money to bring, where you can get attorney fees in some instances. If you do that, they want you to be VA accredited there too. And the argument is, well, you just don't know what you're doing unless you're VA accredited. You don't have access to the VA claims file unless you're VA accredited. Therefore, you must be VA accredited. That's their position. And they also believe that it caps fees at 20%, which it doesn't, neither of which is true. So when you're at the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, for example, the record's sealed, they send you a PDF just like they do in any law firm, and you look at it, and that's the file. And you go through it, and you develop on your own, case notes and whatnot. And that's just what it is. You don't need VBMS or any of these other gadgets that VA has created at taxpayer expense for that. It's only really been for the VSO community. Attorneys can represent you just get a PDF of the file, and that's the file, and you work off of it, and you can do just as fine of a job, or sometimes better, than if you're distracted with the way the claims file looks within VBMS. So it's kind of I guess I'd call it a red herring to use VBMS as an example of why VA accreditation should be mandated. Even still, it gets federal. It's not U.S. versus Minnesota. Minnesota doesn't get a say in what the president of the United States does, even if Governor Tim Walz wants it to. It doesn't matter. And so that's the challenge here. And so Minnesota, in many ways, is jumping the shark when they're trying to regulate these claim sharks. And it's not to say there aren't folks out there doing bad things, but we have existing laws in Minnesota that address it. The first one is called the Unauthorized Practice of Law, which is MnStat 481.02. It's already illegal to help people fill out legal forms. Any claim is a legal form. And if you're not licensed to practice law, it's a misdemeanor in the state of Minnesota. Likewise, if you're not advertising to support CVSOs in Minnesota and you're collecting pay, which we don't do because of this, but if you do it, it's $1,000 a day fine if you don't include that language, which is impossible to include in your Google ad, by the way, or at least very difficult to include. And so all this stuff is already illegal. It's already, you could fraud. It's already a violation of certain contracts rules. So all of this is already regulated, leading to, well, why is Minnesota doing it? The laws are already there. If you engage in fraud, the laws exist. If you engage in unauthorized practice of law, the laws exist. If you advertise something that MDVA doesn't want you to do and they decide to get you, that law exists. It's already there. So why are we doing this? And I think that's a question that only Governor Walz and Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs truly know. But they've been able to get Commander's Task Force locally, as well as the Minnesota Association of County Veteran Service Officers, to come up with the language, none of which was bounced off of a VA accredited attorney before they came up with the finalized language. They didn't refer it to the Minnesota Bar Association, even though they want to regulate attorneys, and we're not regulated in this way, but they are doing it anyway, and they're just going to do it. And I found out today that the VSO community is not interested in negotiating on this. So I've done everything I can do to, as United Veterans Leadership Council, and running that nonprofit here. I've educated them as much as I can, and they don't want to do it. And so the next step is going to be litigation, and that's what'll happen. There's no question that litigation is going to happen out of this. It's already been passed through in a different lawsuit back in 2021, 2020. It already passed through summary judgment. So a similar litigation will make it through summary judgment, and it's going to stick. And what that means is they're going to have to go back to the drawing board again. And so to address any of these bad apples again, or bad actors, whoever, they're going to have to go back to the drawing board, waste more taxpayer resources and time to come up with a law that's written appropriately. And they'll probably not include us again at a seat at the table, because that just seems like that's how they roll right now. They don't want to bring in folks that actually do the work. They just want to regulate you.
Holy shit, Richie. This is a lot of stuff.
Yeah, well, I've been sitting over here for 13 minutes building my soapbox. And I think that, Ben, thank you. Thank you for all that information. And I think that it's pretty fucking clear that it's not about taking care of veterans. I don't think that any of this that they're arguing about is all about taking care of veterans. It's about who's in charge and who's going to tell who can help which veteran. I spent a lot of time of my professional career working in the veteran service industry. And in every instance, when I was working with veterans, when I worked for DEED, for the Minnesota Department of Economic Development and Employment, where I worked as an employment counselor, helping veterans find work and get back on their feet. Hey, did you get to your CVSO? Did you get to the VSOs? Did you get the benefits that you deserve that are owed to you? No, I'd rather starve, man. Those people can't help me. They won't help me. Why would I go there? I'm here. Can you help me? Yeah, I can help you find work, but I can't help you get your disability. Yeah, they told me they can help me in 6 months. I'll be in Arizona, homeless by then. And then from there, I went to another place. I went to a nonprofit where we took World War I horse stables at Fort Snelling and turned them into housing for veterans who were experiencing homelessness or were about to. And we filled up the place. 68 units, 68 veterans who were homeless. Put them there, gave them everything they needed to be successful. My job, services. The staff I hired, services. We got them housed. Now our job was to help them to get on their feet. First, what was the first thing we do? Hey, are you enrolled in the VA system? Most of them, yeah, because they were homeless. And why? were they enrolled in the VA system? Because they could go there and get something hot to eat and a couple bucks maybe to put in their pockets and a hot cup of coffee. But were they getting care? Not really. Hey, well, we're going to have the CVSO's office come down here. Already been there, man. They're not helping us. What do you mean the CVSOs? What the hell are they doing? They don't do nothing for us. So who cares what their training is? Who gives a fuck how they're trained? They're not helping the veterans who need it the most. Veterans like me, you, Ben, you, Jason, they'll help us because we'll walk in there. We're going to drive our trucks in the parking lot. We're going to walk in. Hey, I'm a little short on dough. There's an unmet needs fund. Can I apply for that? Need help paying my mortgage this month. Oh yeah, we'll get you a few $100. Sweet. Hey, I'd like to raise my disability level maybe. Yeah, we might be able to help you with that. Fill out this form. We'll do this, blah, blah, blah. But the veterans who really need it, who are really stuck and really in a hard place, they're not going to the CVSO. They're not going to those people. The ones with really hard cases that have been there maybe, that really need some help, that don't give a shit about giving somebody like Ben a few bucks to get care. It's not about money all the time. These guys want to go and make sure that they can get some insulin. They want to know that they can get some allergy medication. They want to know that they can get some effing care. They don't care about the money all the time. And then all these people sit in these committee hearings. Ben, I watched the one that you were in a couple weeks ago. You did a great job, by the way. Thank you for doing that for veterans. But all these politicians sitting around, and the guy that you were sitting next to, Senator, what's his name? Putnam. What a piece of shit that guy is. Well, I think that we should put this forward, blah, blah, blah. Why don't you go out and talk to veterans, Mr. Putnam? Why doesn't that committee have veterans come off the street? Why don't you ask them who's helping them and who's not? Some dumbass chick with some stupid cap who's a doctor of clothes. What makes her qualified to help veterans? Because she spent 3 months conditioning water somewhere in the fucking Dakotas? Get the hell out of here. Thank you for your service. But you're not going to go out and tell veterans who went forward, who really are suffering, what's best for them. The problem with all of this is that they're trying to take away our choice. When I chose to walk into a recruiting office and put my hand on a Bible and raise the other one and swear an allegiance to this fucking country, I did it on my own free will. And now when my service is over, you're telling me I don't get to choose who's going to help me get my benefits? You're going to tell me where I have to go? And that this man can't help me if I agree to pay him $1,000, $200, $10, $50,000. I don't give a fuck how much it is. It's my choice. But you're not going to let me? Because the more cases you get, MDVA, the more cases the CVSOs get, the more federal funding they get so they can justify their miserable existence. That's bullshit. We're here to help. I thought we were here to help veterans, not limit their choices and take away their shit. Why would we even be having this discussion? Why isn't the discussion, hey, you guys can do this, we can do this, they can do that. There's laws in place, we just heard it, to weed out the bad actors. Why don't we work together to help veterans of all classes, all social economic classes, all genders, all ethnicities, even the ones that like pussy hats? Why don't we help all of them? Why would we tell them where they have to go to get the things that are owed to them, that they chose to sacrifice for this country, and we're going to tell them where they have to go? And then we hear about things like suicide numbers, and that veterans that are committing suicide, a large percent of them not even enrolled in the VA system. Doug Collins said that last week or the week before. A large percentage of our 22 a day not even have anything to do with the VA. Why is it? Why do you think that is? Because we're taking away their choice. Let them choose how they're going to treat themselves. Let them choose where they're going to go get their benefits and how. And if they don't want anything to do with you, don't ostracize them for it. Can you blame them? We're fighting in the halls of our government about where we're going to tell veterans they have to go. Bullshit. That's absolute bullshit. I don't believe it. Sorry, boys, but the whole time you guys were having that discussion, man, I was having a sip of coffee and thinking, I want to interrupt them and climb on this soapbox. But it was all really good information. And I don't know. I don't understand how we got to this place.
Well, apparently, I'll tell you how. Because you took the uniform off, and then apparently some people in the government think you're too stupid to know the difference between getting good help and getting government help. And they don't want you to have that option. You know, they think that they know better than you, which was at least one of them mentioned during the hearing. Senator Gustafson said that they want to make sure that they're watching how veterans spend their dollars.
Yeah, that woman, that brunette woman. Yes.
Apparently, we can't
you don't read
learn
so
good.
good, Jason.
Wow. Got pretty lucky so far.
Holy
Don't
cow,
let my
man.
wife find out.
It's just craziness. It's crazy.
And that's kind of, and I mean, I appreciate how emotional you get when you talk about this stuff, because it is real. And I think your reaction is probably the reaction of most people that would never end up in a place to come meet an attorney for that help, for that exact same reason, right? That you have one negative experience. And I think we all know that the world is built with it's almost like the original Mario Brothers. You know, it's not terribly difficult, but when you don't know the rules of the game and how to navigate it, boy, those first few hours when you were playing that first Mario game were difficult. But once you learn that you had to climb up this to get to that, right? When that path is laid out for you and you can understand it, it makes it easier to enter it. And having a subject matter expert like an attorney to be able to bounce things off of, I think is an absolutely necessary tool in any veteran's post-service life. Because there were so many things that I didn't know until I was told about them. And I'm so thankful that the big guy has laid these people around me, and it made me smart enough to ask a question. Why? And if you take away the people that can answer the why by legislating the new bumpers for people to not want to be in the pool, I mean, what a lost asset for every veteran to just not have the tools that they need.
And who would know, right? Unless you went to that hearing, Ben, and read the legislation, and then you sent us the text like, look at this crap. Like, who would know? Well, if we weren't talking about it and you weren't talking about it, who would know?
We read it and we still didn't get it. I mean, we truly are those. We're not a smart people like Richie and I. I'm only speaking for Richie and I, not Ben,
whoa.
Not anyone else. Just Richie and I. We talked about we have Polish ancestry. We are not a smart people. That's just the way that it works.
Hey, my grandfather was smart, bro.
Well,
apparently every third generation.
I just want to point out, you know, when I was born, I was not always an attorney, right? So I didn't come out of mama's womb with a tie on and in a suit. At one point in time, I was a really bad carpenter with some disabilities after getting out of the military and started to go to college. And that led to me finally learning how to read, you know, so I had to learn how to read good too. And then I did learn to read good. And once I realized that the agency was lying to me about my own claims and trying to withhold benefits, then I had to become an attorney to finally win. It took over 10 years. And I finally won. But I couldn't even find an attorney to hire because of the weird way the laws were written. And even today, there are veterans out there, like if you're in Minnesota and you're in Washington County and you want to go hire an attorney for help on your VA appeal, you cannot go to I don't think there's any law firm in Washington County that takes in veteran appeals right now in Minnesota. So you don't have an ability to go see the whites of the eyes of the person who's going to help you. You don't. And so you got to rely on being referred out to Rhode Island, Maryland, and somewhere else, right? And then on the East Coast, because over there they read even better apparently than in Minnesota.
They're pretty good readers.
Yeah, apparently they're good readers. So that's the gist of it, though. Like I was a bad carpenter, had some issues, and eventually went to school and literally started reading my own claims after many years, realizing, oh wait, that's not true. Why are they saying that? That doesn't make sense. And eventually realized that the government lied to me. And so only by reading documents in my file that showed that the VA lied to me did I realize, oh, they can pay for me to go to law school. Well, I'll be dipped. Oh, they were lying about my disabilities too. Look at that. I'll be dipped. Oh, that was in an IG report. They didn't name me, but I'm pretty sure I was in there. And they talked about how it wasn't right, what was done. And so then I realized, like, wait a minute. Are you telling me, wait, I'm going to go to my VSO to get help? And the VSO DAV says, well, ain't you happy with your 40%? I was like, well, I don't think it's right, though. Well, you got 40%. It's better than most. Be happy.
Yeah, it's better than a kick in the shorts.
Better than a kick in the shorts.
And how many people have that same situation where you don't even realize the disability you have while you have it? I mean, I can say that for myself. I did not understand half of the cognitive dissonance I had with reality. Not that it was impacting every aspect of my life in a negative way, but it was just like in the military, man. We don't stop. You just keep going, work your way through that mission. The best way from point A to B with a mountain in between is over and through. And I didn't care. I was going to go over or through. Well, that is a problem. Because you're not recognizing that, oh, maybe this isn't the mountain, or I can take this easy path around, and unless you've got really good friends that understand you, or somebody they've been down the path yourself, like you. I mean, your origin story for how you became an attorney. Number one, we need to get that over to somebody at DC or Marvel. Rich, you got anybody? I mean, what a great origin story. Probably became the villainous attorney doing good.
Yeah. We'll see how this whole thing turns out first.
Well, but that's, again, and like getting to know you as we have over these past couple of years. I mean, that experience that you have, and to be able to navigate that path with a veteran who's maybe been stopped by the system that's designed to stop them or slow them down, so they understand that they're not crazy, that their issues are real, and that it just needs to get brought to the right place with the right person to have that understood. And I think that's the biggest thing that a Minnesota veteran stands to lose, is having that real advocate to stand by them while they navigate that trail with a great Sherpa, rather than just being thrown, hey, go up this hill, I'm going to do this thing, and then once you get up there, take a look what's in the cave. Bang, they're done.
Yeah.
You're going to an attorney takes you through the entirety of the process, and then tells you where the good is. It shows you where the bad is, and the things that are just completely nonsense. Because we all hear that story too. The CVSO couldn't help me. My pecker didn't work anymore, and I think it was because of this. Hey man, that's not service related. You're 610 pounds. That has nothing to do with it. And they're mad about that. With the CVSO, I mean, how do they sit there in that position and tell somebody, well, it's not service related? They're not going to have that in-depth conversation to tell them why. Or they think, I mean, a little reality helps too. So, but I'm done.
Well, I think that there are people that work in the CVSO offices that care. And I think that there are some that try to help. But I don't think that they have a defensible position on this topic that they can shove out any other service provider. I think that it's uncalled for, and I think it's stupid that they are trying to limit the ability for veterans to have a choice about when and where and how they are going to receive their benefits, or at least seek them out. In fact, the other part of my experience was when I worked for a member of Congress. We had these types of things come up where veterans were pissed off because they didn't have a choice about how to access their own stuff. And I won't get into that because we're running out of time, but there is no reason why we need to take away their choice. And there's no reason why, if there's a professional that doesn't work for free, nobody works for free, go get what's owed to you. If somebody like Ben Krause can help you, then go see Ben. But why would anybody else want to stop him from helping a veteran if he can help? It's just ridiculous.
Well,
It's absolutely asinine.
And just
so
one thing to point out, man, like the cases that I work on are not things that a VSO can usually do. So I'm working on cases.
but they claim they can, can't they?
They do. And you know what? And they're claiming that on behalf of all of Minnesota. So I think it's important to remember, like, we may not agree, but on behalf of all of Minnesota, they have decided that they're going to force attorneys to make a false statement, and mislead a veteran. I mean, that's the function of what their disclosure law and their advertising law require. And so that's not clearly written there. And their MDVA is nonetheless, hasn't stopped the state of Minnesota from trying to say, well, it's whatever MDVA says it is. Yeah. And apparently, that's not up to MDVA. It's up to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. But unless the federal government comes to Minnesota, and I bet they have a lot of other things that they'd rather come to Minnesota to deal with, just a hunch.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this is probably not on the top of a list, any kind of list for them to deal with. But anyway, I think that at the end of the day, veterans need as much help as they can get. In Minnesota, veterans are underserved by everybody, and even the VA federally. Veterans are still underserved. Suicides are still happening that are probably preventable. Veterans are still going without access to their benefits, both financial and healthcare wise, that they otherwise should probably be able to get. They need more services, not less. And I don't think people need to know more about VSOs existing or CVSOs, because that's on all of the information. They have billboards that taxpayer dollars are funding. I don't get taxpayer funded billboards, but if I got one, I'd have to dedicate half of it to saying that a CVSO can do what I can do for free, which is just false. That in and of itself would be a fraudulent misrepresentation. But that's what Minnesota's decided that I should do.
Unreal. Jason, anything to add before we end?
I do. I just have one question for Mr. Kraus. Can we do this again?
We should do this again, and maybe I won't have to wear a suit next time.
And if we
Will
do
you be
that,
shirtless?
I'll be whatever you want, big guy.
can we get a quality computer to make sure that we have this? Because this I feel like has been really good, because we've got unique perspectives, and we're open and honest enough to share them. And with Mr. Kraus here and his expertise, I think it shines a light on the reality versus everybody just thinking that they understand how the situation works. So I just want to say thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, guys. And just one thing to point out here, there are, claim sharks is not the right term. That's just a pejorative that VFW decided to tag them with. But we do have people that are doing things that they shouldn't, that are illegal. And law enforcement in our state should address it. And it can, under the laws. We don't need these laws that are being created by the CVSO community to regulate lawyers who are lawfully doing the work, and it's making veterans, it's chilling legal representation for veterans, not just on veteran benefits appeals, but in other areas like family law or wills and trusts or elder law, and these other areas where attorneys are not getting into the veteran benefits space because of the way the laws are written, and they're afraid of it. And so think about like being a veteran where you need to go in and you have an elder law issue or a wills and trust issue, but you want them to be able to look at your benefits to make sure you're getting paid correctly. Well, it's hard to do that in Minnesota, and I've talked to attorneys that are in that space, and I won't get into particulars because I don't want to reveal, confidences, but there are attorneys that will not represent veterans on benefits matters, therefore can't help at all, who happen to be specialists in these other areas, because of the way Minnesota crafted their laws. And I believe that Minnesota did it on purpose, where the National Association of County Veteran Service Officers advised them on the language to use so that it wouldn't cause a flag to come up for attorneys. And so we didn't know they were doing it until it was too late. And then, now we're stuck with it. And trying to get that changed requires litigation. And that's, takes an incredible amount of lift of time. And we don't get paid to do that. That is, pro bono work to try to maintain the integrity of the legal profession in Minnesota. And we've been around for well before CVSOs existed, attorneys doing work similar to this. And These laws have existed for well before the CVSO community, I believe, existed in Minnesota, or at least before the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs existed, at least. And yet here we are, where Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs, through the governor's office, through MAC VSO, and Commander's Task Force, are all wanting to regulate these bad attorneys, when really what they're supposed to be doing is focusing on claim sharks or pension poachers, which are, it's already illegal anyway. But they want to, ratchet down to, in my opinion, intentionally limit access and to require lawful attorneys to promote non-attorneys to do the same work.
There you have it. All right, folks. Thank you for sticking with us. It's a very important information. It was a long episode today, but holy shit, this stuff is really happening. This is what's really going on in the halls of state government. And here in Minnesota, the swamp of turds is thick as hell. And so these are more things that we're going to keep up on and keep bringing to you. It's important to us because we live here, but I don't think that these are going to be problems that are specific to just Minnesota. I think it's going to be everywhere. So if you like what we're doing here, please consider a like and a follow and a subscribe and a share and a this and a that and all that stuff in between. We really appreciate you. Take it easy. We'll see you next time.